bring John McMullen in, 97.3 ESPN.com. It's been a while, my friend. I feel like I haven't talked to you.
Yeah, I was wondering. I thought you guys were going to the World Series of, I don't know, you go as far as humanly possible. I didn't think you were ever going to come back. So congratulations.
Just keep on going, right? Well, we fell one game short, but here we're back in reality now. But I was watching from afar. We got a chance to watch the game against the Packers. I watched the game against the Bills the other night. Let's start with a couple of things from those games. One, LeGarrette Blount, who has not played pretty well. It has a lot of people hinting that, he could be on that roster bubble. Are you subscribing to that?
No, not at all. I don't understand certain people. You have to understand what the preseason is. It's to evaluate players, and they don't game plan, and they're trying to look at certain things. And I think as you get into it, you'll understand that LeGarrette Blount's not going to be running a lot of stretch plays when it counts. But at the same time, you don't want to be too pigeonholed with certain formations, certain players on the field. So if you have LeGarrette Blount out there and the other team quickly realizes you're not going to run a stretch play, and Wendell Smallwood's out there to run a stretch play, well, you're gonna have some issues. So that's what the Eagles are trying to work out right now. LeGarrette Blount is their starting running back. He's not being cut. That kind of talk is absurd, to be quite frank.
At the running back position, has anything changed a bit? I mean, how do you break down and kind of handicap how that running back position might look? Because Thursday night's really the last time. But for that running back position, the fourth game might have a little impact.
Yeah, I think the name you have to keep an eye on is Donnell Pumphrey, because it's pretty clear he's not ready to contribute. So if you could stash him on injured reserve, you're certainly not going to cut him and try to get him through waivers to put him on the practice squad. But as far as being on the 53-man roster, look, I don't think he can contribute right now. So I think you look at the three guys, and it's going to be Blount, it's going to be Wendell Smallwood, and it's going to be Darren Sproles. And then you have to kind of talk, you want Corey Clement on the final 53, and if you do, it's probably going to be at the expense of Donnell Pumphrey going to injured reserve.
All right, John McMullen's with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. John, I wasn't here. I'm sure you talked a lot about the Darby Matthews trade, but I wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit. Where does this originate from? Is this they like the depth at wideout, or was it, hey, we looked at the secondary and said just simply not good enough?
Well, a combination of both, and you can add in Jordan Matthews' contract situation, the fact that this was going to be his last season. So the mentality was, well, if you can spin him off and get a 23-year-old corner with a pretty high upside, and what Howie Roseman, when he made the trade, said is a cornerback-deficient league, you do it. And it's a steep price because he also had to send along a third-round pick. But it was evident before that trade that was the weakest part of the Eagles roster. It's also evident it no longer is. Darby's a good player. And I said it before, it was such an interesting, even before the trade, that position was an interesting one for Philadelphia because it was weak today, but it had the potential to be very strong down the road. Now you just add to it because you have Darby and Sidney Jones coming back eventually, and Rasul Douglas maybe developing a year down the line on top of Jalen Mills. All of a sudden, when we're talking 12 months from now, we might say this is one of the strongest positions on the Eagles. So that's how things quickly can shift. As far as Jordan goes, I think the Eagles are going to miss him more than they realize. I'll say that because he was a very, very productive player. I think some of their excitement over the lesser players on this roster, whether it be Marcus Johnson, Bryce Treggs, names like that, I don't know if they're going to be able to contribute to where you're going to say we're not going to miss Jordan Matthews, because I think they are.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Agholor gets the first crack at the most reps. Yeah,
I mean, he's the slot receiver, and that was kind of known when the Eagles made the trade. And we've talked about Nelson ad nauseum. He's had a very good spring. He's a very good practice player. He gets consistent separation. He's a great route runner. He's a great blocker. As I explained it, he does everything a great receiver can do except catch the football, and that's pretty important.
Well, has that resurfaced?
Yeah, it has. The inconsistency has. He made a great catch today. He'll make great catches, but he'll also just drop one out of nowhere. That's easy, and we saw it in the first preseason game in Green Bay. Not that it was easy, but on the 2-point conversion, Carson Wentz throws him a fastball. Good receivers catch that football. He wasn't even close to catching it. He often has trouble with the deep ball, tracking it in, it seems. He's always working on it after practice. He's doing drills to try to improve. But at some point you have to say, look, it's never going to be Chris Carter. It's never going to be Odell Beckham with these tremendous hands. You just have to hope he gets over the hump and becomes a somewhat consistent guy when it comes to catching the football.
John McMullen with us, our 97.3 ESPN Eagles insider. And, John, it appears like what a difference 24 hours makes, because over the weekend there was talk about Alshon Jeffery. Had he fallen behind a little bit? Was he slow to learn the offense? Were he and Carson not connecting? And then all reports, including yours on our 97.3 ESPN.com page today, say that Alshon Jeffery had a good day today.
Yeah, he did, at the expense, a lot of it, of former Eagle Byron Maxwell. So a lot of the fans there were enjoying that part of it. But also the fact that obviously Jay Cutler was in, and he had so much success with Alshon in Chicago, and Adam Gase is the coach of the Dolphins, who was the coordinator of those two for 1 year in Chicago. And those guys just speak so highly of Alshon Jeffery. And you know, Cutler said, just throw it up and he'll go get it. And Adam Gase said he's the only player he's ever coached where he said he drew up a play, just throw it to Alshon. Doesn't matter if there's 2 people on him, 3 people on him. He's liable to go get it. And that's the kind of respect he has. He ran the wrong route in the opening drive against Buffalo. And a lot of people jumped on that and said he was behind. And he's missed a lot of practice because he hurt his shoulder early and he's held out of team drills. The Eagles were being very cautious. But of your worries on this team, Alshon Jeffery should be very, very low on that list.
How about Torrey Smith? Because I saw the report that he hasn't been targeted yet in the 2 preseason games so far. People wrote off Torrey Smith when he came in as, boom, pencil him in, starter at right wide receiver, boom, he's in. But is it that simple?
Yeah, he's going to be the starter, and it's even more simple now that Jordan's gone because you don't have nearly as much depth as you had when Nelson was the 4th receiver because he's got to go in as a slot guy. So Torrey is what he is. He's a deep guy. He's a speed threat, and he's not going to be targeted a lot. I've said it from pretty much day one. I mean, the volume guys on this team are going to be Jeffery, Zach Ertz, and now Nelson Agholor will take that Jordan Matthews slot. He'll get likely more targets than Torrey Smith. So you're talking about a guy who's probably 4th on the pecking list for getting the football. His job is to stretch the field and make opposing defenses nervous, and he can run. And he got Byron Maxwell today on a deep ball. And that's what he's capable of doing. But if you're looking for a guy who's going to catch 6 passes a game consistently, I don't think you're going to get that out of Torrey Smith.
John McMullen's with us. So if you're looking at the receiver position, John, and I think you've said in the past on this show that 6 is about the number that you think that they'll keep. But how do you see that last spot breaking down? How do you see those 6 receivers?
Well, I think the 3 obvious ones we just talked about, the starters. Then Mac Hollins is going to make this football team as a draft choice and a special teams guy. He's probably not ready to be an every down receiver. Marcus Johnson has been a guy the Eagles are very, very high on since the off season. He kind of took a step back with a hamstring injury. And then Bryce Treggs had the big game against Green Bay and sort of hurt his leg. He's been out since with the leg soreness. And those would have been your six. I think Shelton Gibson is slowly climbing back into it. He's finally settled down. He's finally catching the football. He admitted he struggled to learn the offense for a long time because what they ran in West Virginia was very simple. And you could tell he was thinking out there. It was affecting him catching the football. Now he's starting to feel a little bit better. He's still behind those guys, but he's now put himself in the conversation that maybe if he has a strong couple of preseason games to finish it out, he could find a spot on the roster, especially since Treggs and Johnson have gotten hurt.
Talk with John McMullen here. On the defensive side of the ball, I want to look at corner a little bit here. Darby obviously takes over as the top guy. How does the rest of that position kind of shake down now for you with the addition of Darby, and now that you've seen him in there, for at least a couple series?
Well, Darby's going to be the left corner, so that immediately flips Jalen Mills over to the right side. He'll be the starter at the right corner. And then Patrick Robinson has moved in over the past week and started taking the first-team reps in the slot position. And that's the most interesting part of it, because before he hurt his hamstring against Green Bay, Ron Brooks had been taking those snaps. He just got back to practice this week. He's been on the second team. And then the Eagles have this big nickel package where they put Malcolm Jenkins down in the slot and they bring Corey Graham in at safety opposite Rodney McLeod. So those are your three options on the table. And it looks like it's going to be a game plan thing from week to week for Jim Schwartz. He mentioned, if you're playing the Dallas Cowboys, for instance, you don't want Malcolm Jenkins in the slot because he's going to be covering Cole Beasley, this incredibly quick receiver, and that's just not the strength of his game. So that's where you need Robinson and or Brooks to sort of pick it up and play that position on weeks like that. But I think it's going to be difficult for both of them to make this football team. So I think ultimately you'll have that battle between Robinson and Brooks, and I think the loser is probably going to get cut because the Eagles are obviously going to keep Rasul Douglas because of his upside, and it's going to be difficult to carry both veterans. So I think in a lot of ways that comes down to a battle between the two of them.
Yeah, and then you look at what Darby adds to the defense, and you look at the defensive front now, Derek Barnett, who was banged up over the weekend, and Brandon Graham. It seems that they like Barnett maybe more than they thought they would like at this stage. He seems like he's coming along a little faster. That getting that true number one type of corner in there, you wrote about it this weekend, that your expectations for the defense seemingly have gone up now.
Yeah, I think on paper this is the top 10 defense. I really do. They had a bit of a scare today because Brandon Graham left practice very early, but he looks like he just strained his triceps. It's not going to be that serious. Jordan Hicks also left, but he's had trouble with the hand. But when you look at them at full strength, it's pretty good. Now that Darby's here, you've cemented at least to the point where a significant weakness is at least average or maybe even above average on certain weeks. And then you talk about the defensive front, which is top 5 in this league, if everybody's out there. You talk about the linebackers. Hicks and Bradham have proven they're both 3-down linebackers, and they have very good safeties. And as I wrote, this team was 13th in the NFL last year. I don't think a lot of people realize that in total defense. So with Darby out there, this is one of the better defenses in the NFL.
There was a time when people thought Jim Schwartz was going to be taking phone calls to be a head coach based on how well their defense had been playing.
Yeah, early in the season, especially if you think about what they did to Sam Bradford and the Vikings, who at the time were undefeated. I think that's when the cusp of that talk really took off, and the Eagles certainly for a couple reasons. Obviously, Minnesota wasn't as good as most people thought, and the second part is that obviously they knew Sam very well, and they understood how to defend him better than probably anybody else. And they leveled off a bit from there. But Jim is a really good defensive coach. He's been a head coach in this league in the past, and I could see those rumors cropping up again this year because he's got a lot of talent on that side of the ball.
John McMullen's with us, our 97.3 ESPN Eagles insider. So, John, what stood out at today's joint practice for you with Miami? Those joint practices are always interesting to watch.
Well, what stood out to me is just how much the Miami writers loved Carson Wentz. So I was talking to Josh off air, and I don't know what it is because in some point of it is I think Carson had a sharp day. But I think part of it is they're used to watching Ryan Tannehill, and I'm just not a big Ryan Tannehill fan. And I compared it to when Tom Brady and the Patriots came here, what it was 3 or 4 years ago, us covering the Eagles, we were in awe because we had never seen anything like it as far as the crispness and accuracy throwing in football. And the Patriot writers, on one hand, are used to it. So I think it was part of the fact that he had a good day. Part was the fact that they're used to watching a quarterback who struggles with his accuracy. But overall, you would have to say he was very, very efficient. And certainly you can see the chemistry developing between Alshon Jeffery and Torrey Smith. Specifically, because those were the two guys that got the Dolphins a bunch.
So those are two things that stood out to you. You write on our website on 973ESPN.com, and that perked my interest. There was a fake field goal try, and it was successful.
Yeah, I don't know if I would want to use it in a game because it's Donnie Jones rolling out from the holder position to go to Brent Selleck. I think that's something, hey, you throw it out there in practice, you see if it works, but that would not be on the top of my list. I'll take the 3 points. But they did complete the pass, so there's that positive aspect.
Just like Jay Cutler used to complete passes to Alshon Jeffery, and he spoke afterwards and kind of told people not to worry about Alshon.
Yeah, it really was. The Eagles' assistant coaches talked over the weekend, and this all stems from that because Mike Groh, the receivers coach, told us is probably an example of a position coach who's not used to, being in front of the media all the time. And he told us the truth. And the truth was that Alshon ran the wrong route against Buffalo. And obviously people took the baton and ran with that and put 2 and 2 together and said he's missed a lot of practice time, which he did with the shoulder injury, and started asking if he was behind, if he was having trouble picking up the offense. And that's why you had it was interesting because of who you had here today, as I mentioned, with Jay Cutler and Adam Gase, and both of those were like rolling their eyes. They're like, if you're worried about Alshon, I mean, that's the last thing you have to worry about. And that's kind of what I've been saying since the spring. If he's healthy, he's going to be effective.
Yeah, and I kind of echo those sentiments with veteran guys. It's really, it's funny when a guy has a good preseason game now after the Bradford game, you minimize it. We can't take anything for what you see in a preseason game. But when guys aren't playing well, sometimes you do hear questions like on Alshon Jeffery or LeGarrette Blount, and then you start to dissect that. But realistically, kind of like I think it was Frank Reich said today, the veteran guys, they're not really holding them to any standard in these games.
No, well, I mean, you have to hold them to a standard. I mean, you'd like to be successful. Everybody would like to be successful, but I think you have to realize that there is no game planning, and it's more of an evaluation thing. So on one hand, you can't point out that the Eagles defense looked really, really good against Buffalo and then say right off the fact that the offense didn't look good at all. Can't run the football, tried to run it at least, which to me was a positive because Doug didn't try to do that the week before. So you can't have it both ways. But, I mean, I think it's fair to say I never take much stock in the preseason, good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Schwartz constantly talks about that, Peyton Manning, when he was with Indianapolis, they used to get drummed every single year in the preseason. They just didn't care. And then they go out and win 13 games. And that 0-16 Lions team was 4-0 in the preseason. So I think that tells you what you need to know about the preseason.
John's with us here. Of course, the Eagles play Thursday night against the Miami Dolphins. Their early final dress rehearsal. The corner spot was such a glaring number one weakness. Is it still the top questionable spot following that deal?
No, it's no longer their worst spot. I think their worst spot now is running back. And I think there is a concern because while I said before, I think people who think LeGarrette Blount are going to get cut, I disagree with them, but I'm not saying he's great by any stretch of the imagination. And the fact that, we talk about preseason success. Corey Clement had a 24-yard run and a 6-yard touchdown run, and people are getting the gold jacket ready and calling up Canton to get the bus ready. I mean, this is a concern for this team, but Deuce Staley spoke on Saturday. It's evident, by the way, that Wendell Smallwood, who has been out with a hamstring injury, is still way, way ahead of Corey Clement on as far as the coaching staff goes. The key with him is they got to keep him healthy. But again, we're not talking about Eric Dickerson in his prime. We're talking about Wendell Smallwood. The only guy you can really, really count on is the same guy you can always count on, Darren Sproles. But if you give him the football too much, we've seen it, he's going to wear it down.
I guess, John, real quick, of course, John covers the league nationally for FanRag Sports NFL, and the news today, Sports Business Journal reporting that the NFL is close to extending Commissioner Roger Goodell for another 5 years. His current contract ends in 2019. So profits are up, extensions around.
Yeah, so... I often say Roger Goodell is the highest paid lightning rod in the world. That's what he's paid to be, and he does it well. So the owners aren't going away from him, it works. For them, I think the realization is that Roger takes all the criticism, takes all the heat, and the casual fan, the casual public doesn't understand that he's just doing the bidding of the 32 owners, and they get to sit back in sort of a Bilderberg fashion, and they have the power from behind the scenes. They get to do what they want, and they have a front man who takes all the criticism, so they love it.
Yep, and looks like he will get an extension through the year 2024. So when that deal goes down, I'm sure we'll dive a little deeper into that. A lot of NFL news and notes we'll dive into throughout the week with John. Check him out on Twitter at JF McMullen and read his national coverage at FanRag Sports NFL for all of his Eagles news and notes. Head to 97.3ESPN.com. All right, John, talk to you tomorrow, pal.
Hey, welcome back, Mike.